morning and welcome to the Leadership Winston-Salem March Leaders and Lunch webinar. For those of you who may be less familiar with Leadership Winston-Salem, I'm Catherine Perry. I'm the Executive Director, and we are a nonprofit organization that works with 64 community leaders each year to educate, connect, and energize them to serve and improve our community. Hosting webinars like this one is just one of the many ways that we continue to educate our class members and stay connected to our alumni. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jack Elster and Frida Mitchell. Jack and Frida are graduates of the Leadership Winston-Salem class of 2021 and members of the Alumni Council. Jack and Frida were the two-person powerhouse planning committee who put our webinar together today. My sincere thanks to them for their hard work, and Jack and Frida, take it away.
Thanks, Catherine. Winston-Salem is known for its rich history of arts and innovation, but are we living up to that name? What can local artists glean from our community to sustain a life in the arts? We are thrilled to introduce three members of the local art scene to share their experience, knowledge, and work within the City of Arts and Innovation. Our moderator, Chase Law, serves as the President and CEO of Arts Council of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. Ms. Law has more than 20 years of experience in the nonprofit art sector. Leading up to her current position, she lived and worked in the Charlotte area for 18 years, where she quickly emerged as a leader in the arts and cultural nonprofit community. Ms. Law joined Blumenthal Performing Arts in 2015 after leading development efforts at Discovery Place. In addition, she previously served as a senior position at Charlotte's Art and Science Council as executive director at Carolina Concert Association and as development director at Community School of the Arts, all based in Charlotte area. Prior to her career in the nonprofit sector, she lived in New York City, where she was an actor, singer, and dancer. The daughter of two musicians, Chase has spent her entire life surrounded by the arts. Miss Law is no stranger to the triad. She grew up in Ashboro and is a 97 graduate from High Point University, where she earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Theater Arts, Performance and Acting, with a minor in music. She also married her husband of 25 years in Winston-Salem. Both her husband, Ron, and daughter, Chloe, are deeply involved in the work in the arts as well. Chase is the past chair of Tosca Music and currently serves on the board of Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership and the board of advisors for the Women's Reach Network. Chase is thrilled to be in Winston-Salem and working to continue making the arts and cultural sector thrive in our community.
Thank you for having me today. Glad to be here.
Spencer Aubrey, aka Edicott, is a creative connector and curator who resides in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He joined our community in 2019. After joining the community, he began pouring himself in the creative community in the very few first months of his stay, traveling back and forth to Arizona for gigs booked in DJing and poetry through the end of 2019, while all actively pursuing creative opportunities in Winston-Salem as a DJ, spoken word poet, dance instructor, barback, bartender, and barista. Spencer actually holds a bachelor's degree of general studies from Arizona State University and a Master's of Arts in Poetry from Wilkes University. Also, Miss Endia Beal is a North Carolina-based artist, curator, and author whose work merges fine arts with social justice. She uses photography and video to reveal the often overlooked and unappreciated experiences unique to people of color. Ms. Beal is featured in several online editorials, including the New York Times, National Geographic, and Time Magazine. Her work has been exhibited in several institutions, including the National Museum of Art, the New Orleans Museum of Art, and the Aperture Foundation. Ms. Beal's photographs are in both private and public collections on view at the Studio Museum in Harlem, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Ms. Beal holds a dual degree in art history and studio art from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and a Master of Fine Arts from Yale University. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Great. Well, we're happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to a conversation with Endia and Spencer today. It should be a good time. I've worked with both of them. They are definitely valuable artists in our community and thought leaders. And so I think we're in for a treat today. So thank you so much for your time. And let's just jump right into some Q&A and have a conversation. As we look at our artists, and I know as I've been in my role for a little over 2 years, we are really committed here at Arts Council to finding new ways to support artists, lift them up, and ensure that the career that they have chosen in this wonderful field that we all work, that it is valued and just supported in the right ways. And so we are really working hard to continue to evolve that part of our mission and vision and outlook here at Arts Council. From an artist perspective and working regularly, when did you realize that you could actually monetize your artwork? We'll start with Endia.
No, definitely. First and foremost, this feels like I feel so connected. I am so local from Winston, I remember being on floats at the WSSU parade. So like that local. And it's just a pleasure to talk about this with you guys. I think that I'm a strong believer that you can't follow in someone's path and expect a different outcome, right? And so growing up here in Winston-Salem, especially growing up in high school, I didn't know many artists who are making a living in their profession, right? And not until I went to college did I realize that there were artists out in the world making work that was important to them, but more importantly, they were thriving, And I think a lot of times when people think about artists, they don't think about thriving, right? And so it was important for me to surround myself with artists who I admired, who were pushing me, who were also doing the thing that I wanted to do. And so I'm a big history buff, so I was researching all these artists, like what do they do? Where do they go? How do they spend their time in order to gain a certain level of success that I was looking for? And so I think that not until I left Winston in many ways, was I able to explore the opportunities as a maker and think about what it means to actually make a living doing this thing that we love. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Spencer, how about you?
Well, I would say there's two parts to that. So there's a tangible part and there's not the more intangible part. The intangible part was, I think I realized that monetizing artwork, listening to different musicians and knowing that there were other, throughout history, people doing that was something that it could be done. But I would say the more tangible way that could be done, it didn't start for me until college either.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was doing some stuff in my undergrad with poetry, but I booked my first gig at Arizona State doing a house party for somebody and DJing a house party. I was like, oh, this could actually be something. So it was, just the act of somebody giving that opportunity in a space where I wasn't necessarily just looking for, just trying to do something that I really enjoyed. Like, hey, here's $50. Thanks for doing this. And it's like, oh, I could do this. So that it was definitely in college when that kind of began.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Starting to, taste what it can be like to really serve as a professional and how do you grow from there. And that sort of leads me to my next question is how then, as you start to dip your toe into that, if you're just getting into the industry to where you are right now, how are you identifying opportunities to be able to either, sell your artwork or get paid for what you do? What are those opportunities? How are you building that for yourself, or how are you seeking out opportunities?
Yeah, I would say it's really relational. A lot of the people that are either contacting me for specific things, whether it be poetry or music or any of the artistic things I'm doing, many of those have come by way of a friendship, or somebody knew somebody and they were they're a friend of theirs or somebody's family member. And so much of it is very relational. It has a lot more, I think, depth in terms of how do that's my friend, or like that's my cousin, or that's my cousin's cousin. And they were like, hey, we heard you, and this was something that really touched them, or they were inspired by your style. And so that is basically the bedrock of a lot of the ways that I end up getting, gigs. It's just having friendships, building those types of relationships. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I mean, you have your own form of art that you practice and hone, but as you build these relationships and identify opportunities, you can also, in some ways, organically develop a new collaboration and a new art form, if you will, from these relationships. I think it's really valuable. How about you, Endia? I know that you've been in had your toe in different arenas around visual arts, and I know you're doing a lot of new and innovative things now. I'd love to hear more from your perspective on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, mine was definitely relationships as well. I remember having my first article, I might have been like 19 in the Chronicle, right? Jason Pitt, I went to school with him, and his father owned the Chronicle, and they found out what I was doing in terms of art at UNC Chapel Hill and said, we want to write about you. And from that Chronicle article, I had my first exhibition at White Space Gallery here in Winston-Salem that was owned by Shavara and Marlon Hubbard. And that was the first time I realized that I could actually sell my work. I think I sold my first prints for like $50, right? And really 25 because they got 50%. So I sold my first prints for $25. And I'll never forget, we had the opening at White Space. It was beautiful. And we sold the whole show, right? Like literally everything sold. And that was the first time I was like maybe 20, 21 years old. I was like, wait, I can, even though I only made like maybe $1,000 that night, right? But still for me, that was huge. And to know that, just here locally, going away, coming back home, getting the love and support from the Chronicle that allowed me to create my first gallery opening here in Winston-Salem, and getting that first taste of what it felt like to not only show your work, to talk about your work, but have it appreciated. I tell artists, your art in your house, if it's sitting in your studio, it's not in the world, right? And I think for many young artists, it's not even about the money. It's about knowing that this object is going to be in someone's living room, right? Or in someone's dining room. That changes everything for us. And so having that first taste made me realize that it was relationships, meeting people, networking with folks, having conversations, talking about my work, putting it out there in a way that allowed people to have access to it and hopefully understand it in some way. So it was absolutely the same, building those relationships for sure.
That's great. Yeah, again, relationships matter, especially in the arts and cultural sector. So it's really key to have that. But, the other thing is sort of, as an artist, we are all building our own business, right? And the business centers around the artist and the work that we're creating. So, as you've been paid for your artwork and building that up over the years, where did you learn the business aspect of being an artist, and who taught you that, and what's being taught to our local artists currently? What are the resources available?
Yeah. Spencer, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take it.
I'll go next. I'll go right after you. Go ahead. Yeah.
That sounds good. As far as, for me, a lot of it has come by failure. I've learned a lot through doing things, or not having specific information. There's some of it where it was like, well, maybe I need to get my turntable serviced, or I didn't really understand all of the signal flow for an event, running live sound, and having to learn that through hey, well, the mics are hot, how do I fix that? Some of it has come from friends and other mentors and people that are professionals in different aspects, and them providing some different time. I met with there's a gentleman who runs sound over at Benton Convention Center, and I had a meet up with him, to talk about, hey, how do we best set up this and a board so that we can do this event. And he spent about an hour and a half with me, and we were talking, and he gave me a lot of really interesting things to think about, ringing the room, doing different things that would really help out with the overall condition of the performance, but also add value to what we're doing. And so some of it is by way of just people's you know, those relationships we were talking about earlier, of people being able to say like, hey, I have time and space, and I also have a, you know, some sort of professionalism in this, and I can help you. And some of it is just by, you know, doing the thing and realizing this works, this doesn't work, and, you know, really trying to nail down in some ways what actually is going to be beneficial for, you know, moving forward, and what do I need to actually put to the side and say, you know what, that probably is not something I'm going to do next time.
Mhm.
So
Some trial and error.
yeah, definitely. And as far as resources, I mean, there's resources all over the place. I would say even just people individually are some of the best resources, because they have, you know, a history of certain things. Like there's people in my neighborhood, you know, I was having a conversation with one of my neighbors, found out that he's been, you know, tutoring children for what, 25 years, and just gave me some tips about, you know, being able to address an audience in a different way that really helped and affected the ways that I present poetry, you know. And then so that's, I wasn't even expecting that, but it was through that conversation, just talking to my neighbor, enjoying some time in an afternoon, that was something that was pivotal in how I would, you know, go forward with presenting. So that's just one example.
Yeah, that's great. Endia, what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that, you know, a lot of times the university or even art school is not going to teach you how to be a brand, right? They're not teaching you the business aspect. And a lot of it is because they want you to focus on the making. They want you to focus on your message, your content, your voice. But in that same breath, when you get out in the world, right, it becomes so much more than that. How do you navigate a gallery? How do you navigate an agent? How do you navigate, you know, an opportunity to have your work showcased on a platform? Do you pay for licensing? What does it mean to have something in perpetuity, right? I think a lot of things that as young artists, we just don't get those tools, you know, and it really takes someone saying, hey, no, wait, let me talk to you about this. Or you taking the initiative to ask those questions. I remember I sold some pieces to Portland Art Museum, Portland State University. And at that point, I was selling my photographs for maybe $2,000. And the lady said, can I talk to you about your prices? And I was like, sure. And in my mind, $2,000 was a lot. And she was like, honey, I can buy all of these. Okay. Like literally, I can buy all of these. And like, you know, like you're worth more. Like you're worth more. Your message is worth more. What you're doing is more.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to raise those prices, and then I'll buy one from you. Like that is rare for someone to say that to you, to tell you your worth and your value. And I think so many times as artists, we don't have those people in our life who can say, listen, no. I'm a part of this field. Your photographs are beautiful. You need to do more than what you're doing. You know, or your message is way more important. People need this in the world. You need to check that. You need to really think about what that is as a brand, what you're bringing to institutions, what you're bringing as a Black person with these experiences that haven't been discussed before, right? And so I think for me, I was blessed enough to have people in my life who pulled me aside and said, you have something to offer, and you need to make sure the world actually pays you for what you're giving them. You know, because I think so many times as a young artist, we don't think about that. We just want it in the world. We just like, it's like breathing, right? We just want to breathe, right? So we're putting this artwork in the world and we want people to kind of to take on to it, but we don't understand that there's other parts of that need to be, that are just as important. And so in terms of resources, I would say that, you know, every state has a different pot of resources, right? I remember getting my first Arts Council grant. I bought my first camera, you know, with my grant from the Arts Council, right? And, you know, I'd applied twice and didn't get it because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. You know? And so finally, I did it right and got my first camera. I've been renting cameras before. I couldn't afford to buy a $2,000 camera, and Arts Council gave me that money so I could get that. But everyone didn't know about that, right? Everyone didn't know about that opportunity and that resource. So I think the resources are out there. I think that as artists, as North Carolina artists especially, we have to think about ourselves outside of our own state. Like I tell young artists all the time, that you have to find the people who are going to appreciate your voice. And sometimes it's not necessarily at home. right? And not saying that home doesn't love you, but sometimes you have to step outside. Maybe it's in Japan, maybe it's in, New York, maybe it's in, Alabama, where there's someone doing something similar to you. I think that what I said earlier about the relationships is the art world is like this big and everyone knows everyone, right? And so when you start to realize that your voice can be louder, the North Carolina can be louder than the United States can be louder, then you realize, oh, wait, I have something to say outside of even my own state, which actually makes my state come alive even more because it shows the beauty that's coming out of North Carolina. Does that make sense? So I think that a lot of it has to do with looking outward as a young artist, thinking about the resources that are globally available to you, and not necessarily just thinking about the resources that are available locally. I think that you can start that way, like I did, but then eventually you get to a place where you have to start thinking about it from a global view, for sure.
Yeah, that's a great viewpoint. And, I hope that we can, as we look at resources here locally, and Arts Council, of course, wants to build up those resources, but it's not just showcasing what's available here. Yes, how do we broaden that out? And then how do we point folks in the right direction? That is so important. It's so important. I love what you just said about being worth more. I love that. And that is something that we have had multiple conversations with area artists and with area businesses. As we look at this industry, I think that we have often, or the community and several communities I've lived in, is the arts, unfortunately, are always sort of looked at like dessert. And you know what? They're not just for dessert anymore. Arts, there's always art and entertainment and fun. That's always going to be a part of the arts and cultural sector, but arts are all around us, right? Arts tell stories, arts create change. And as, an artist puts, it's like the one behind me. I mean, there's a story behind me here, right? There's artists, our artistry events happening in our community. It's really a part of every facet of a community, and Winston-Salem, Forsyth County is no different. So we're fighting the good fight along with artists, and we want artists to be considered small businesses. So we're really kind of shifting the narrative to really create some awareness around why paying an artist for what they do is worth it. So, because you're worth more. Yeah, that's great. I will say, just again, going back, sort of looking at the local economy, I've been really impressed with some of the stats that we have here. The arts community at large creates about $157 million in annual economic impact. I'd love to hear from your perspective, what the arts can do for a local economy. And how it builds up that economic impact further. How can we help it grow and make a community even more vibrant?
Yeah.
And do you want to go?
Sure. And there's like three parts to that question, James.
I know. I'm always like a three-parter.
Right. And I think that as business leaders, first and foremost, we have to be innovative in our approach. We look at any brand, whether it's Google, anything that, people are pushing the envelope, right? Collaborating with artists, creating opportunities. And I think that, if we're talking about just cities and collaboration, I think that the arts brings so much to making us aware of the things that sometimes we ignore, right? And so we think about the business of art, and that's whether it's theater, whether it's performance, whether it's painting, whether it's graphic design, like all of those things are allowing people to not only be inspired and motivated, but also educating them in how we can navigate just human existence, right? And connecting with one another. So if we talk about just that one part of art being central to our economy, is how we evolve, is how we push things, how we develop things, right? Having those trial and errors, being able to create something and push things in terms of our ideas. So that's one aspect. And I also think there's a collaborative aspect, right? Allowing brands and corporations to collaborate with artists in ways. And I think there's some cities, even across North Carolina and Winston, who've created opportunities for artists to come in and develop things with them and push conversations and really grow as an organization and a brand as well. And I hope I answered the question. Yes.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
That's good. What about you, Spencer?
Yeah, I think, well, economy has a lot of different applications, right? You
Yeah.
have fiscal, you've got like social, relational, there's a bunch of different ways that the economic structure in any city or in this city particularly is affected. I would say fiscally, I mean, you look at like the Black Theater Festival, right? So that in itself is something that draws, hundreds of, there's thousands of people that come to see, to be here, to be present in the midst of that. And I think that, it brings a lot of different, whether it's vendors or just different people from different backgrounds into this city, and creates this explosion of just involvement and like support. And I think that's something like we think about like some of the bigger events like that, or some of the bigger shows and festivals and things that happen. And I would say that those things are definitely impactful on a huge level. But I would say on the day-to-day level, even stuff that is going on in Arts Council right now with the Amplifier, with the lab, like it makes an impact because people locally are supporting people locally and giving an opportunity for their voices to be heard in the context that they actually live and work and like see things often. So there are things that draw people from outside in, and then there's some things also, specifically those events that are allowing for that to breathe within, the context of the city. So I think on the fiscal side, like it's making an impact to help, not only just the arts itself, but other local businesses and other things. And then as far as, some of the things that are locally going on, it provides space, and even just kind of pushing into that social relational context, building the economy of like relationship amongst artists and audiences and just people in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Which is, I think is, that's not to say it's hard to kind of weigh that sometimes, because you still need food, you need money to eat, and you also, but like, I think we're built for relationship, and that economy and how you, structure that so it's not necessarily just siloed, but can be more interconnected, is going to provide a much, richer environment for growth and for opportunity. And so, I think what's happening in terms of how that affects that, I think there's a lot of positive things that are coming from that, especially as more events and more, of those opportunities are becoming available for artists. So.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think, as we're looking at things here at Arts Council about, how are we, how we as the arts and cultural sector are impacting economic impact and growth from just from a revenue perspective, but it's also from a cultural perspective as well. And how are we using the arts to bring community together and break down a bunch of silos that are in the community. So how are we telling the story of how arts fit into each subset, so we can drive different missions, if you will, across the city and the county. I think that's really important. And at the end, it's going to enhance the workforce development piece, the professional development piece, and the overall economic impact. So I think that's great. That's really great. What kind of, I know we touched on this earlier in our conversation, but what other kind of programs are already in place or maybe missing that are here to sustain the livelihood of our artists?
So go ahead.
No, go for it. You're fine.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that Winston-Salem, like I'm from Winston, so I can be extra critical of the city because I'm from here, right? So it changes the relationship to how I think about it. I think Winston-Salem has grown significantly over the years. I remember downtown being a place you just didn't go, right? And it has really evolved in a way that is exciting and innovative and really pushing it. In that same breath, we have a long way to go, right? I think that when I left Winston-Salem, I realized so much more about who I was as a person because I was away from the city, right? Like I didn't know about Sika or Renolda or any of that while I grew up here because I wasn't necessarily welcomed in those spaces in the way I felt that I should have been, right, growing up. And so my parents didn't feel connected. We didn't go, right? And so not until I came back to my city did I find myself rediscovering aspects of the city that I didn't know about growing up. Like I didn't know about Sika or Renolda or any of those things because I lived on another side of town, right? And so I think that in terms of being more connected as a city, in terms of being able to bring certain areas together, right? I feel like we have a long way to go, right? In terms of being able to be more connected. So like I said, I can be more critical of the city I grew up in and the things I discovered once I left. In terms of just pushing opportunities for artists, I think that if there's one thing I would say that's missing that is needed are just spaces for artists. Like I think right now we provide funding, we provide opportunities maybe to have exposure. But what I found is that many artists are working in their apartments. They're working in their garages. They're working in their, or in a studio space that you're like, am I going to breathe in lead paint, right? Like I'm a bougie artist, like I want a nice space, So like thinking about what does it mean to be an artist, but work in a space that is actually inspiring. In New York, the World Trade Center towers before 9/11, New York City had created a space for their artists in the building, right? Like in the towers. And after 9/11, when that tragedy happened, when they rebuilt the buildings, they created another space for artists. Like they made artists a priority in their city. And I think that's what's missing, is that we're putting up all these beautiful structures. And yeah, that's great. But where's the inspiration, right? Like Brooklyn is great, but Brooklyn's great because of the artists who went there, Like the artists made Brooklyn, right? So what people fail to realize is that when you have artists in your space becomes this cool spot, right? Your space becomes the place people want to go, they want to hang out, they want to be there. And I think that as innovators, if we're going to be the city of arts and innovation, then we need to actually create spaces for the artists to actually make their work, right?
Yes.
Like that's number one. And then everything else is not important. So I think that one thing that we can do as we push, as we grow, as we build, is to keep in mind that we are the city of arts and innovation, that we need to uplift our artists, that we need to give them spaces that are affordable, right? That make sense, that are big enough, that are nice, they're not some little hole in the wall that nobody wants to be in, that can actually highlight. Because if we do highlight the artist, like the High Line in New York, like, even in Charlotte and other cities, in Durham, when you walk into Durham, the whole entrance is a mural, right? When you go into the city, you are introduced to this dope artist who did this amazing mural when you enter the city. When you highlight that beauty, it brings people there. It brings money there. It brings growth there.
Amen. 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 I love it. You're speaking my language. I can't tell you how many artists that we've talked to that have those same sentiments. There is a missing piece of having that space, and not, of all levels, right? So not just incubator space, but we need more further incubator space, but we also need that intermediary space. Like I've talked to a couple of artists that are ready to take their business to the next level, and they don't have the resources or the outlet to be able to do that. And so, that is something that we are hearing time and time again and want to respond to, but we want the community to come along with us, because it can't just be in one spot. It needs to be in multiple spots. Totally agree with that. It's great. That's great. I'm going to turn it over to Spencer for a second, because my next question, which you sort of answered a little bit here, Endia, we're known as a city of arts and innovation, and what does that actually mean to you as an artist? But you sort of you danced on that already, but I'd love to hear from Spencer. Like, what does it mean to you to be a city of arts and innovation?
Well, I mean, I don't think I could say it better than Endia did.
It's pretty awesome.
Honestly, I mean, there are some things going on as far as spaces, but it's not cohesive. And I think the City of Arts and Innovation, I mean, it kind of is, it's a juxtaposition. Well, in some ways it's a juxtaposition, but it's also like those two things are coming together to create something. And so, I mean, there's a lot of innovating going on. To the point, like there's a whole lot of different buildings, there's a whole lot of sustainability efforts for certain things happening in, you know, in the city. But yeah, I mean, arts does feel maybe more siloed, and I can go to a gig and say, hey, we're gonna hang out at this person's gig, we're gonna kick it for a little bit, but then at the end of the gig, you may have a conversation for an hour, but it's like, where are you gonna go? You got to go to the next person's gig or the next person's gallery showing or the next person's thing to see them, to hang out with them outside of, you know, in a maybe more creative context where you can be inspired. And so you're kind of jumping around, and you kind of, you know, it's a very nomadic thing. So to be a city of arts and innovation, I think there's some permanence and some place, like a very thorough understanding of those two things. And, you know, I'll use the pop-up scene, for instance. A lot of businesses are, you know, I'll just maybe take food. There's food pop-ups in city, right? And there's a point where the food pop-up begins and they're doing the thing, they're going to different places and they're, you know, cooking in the commissary, doing the thing, and then going out to different places to do the pop-up. There's a point where somebody is like, hey, we need a more like stationary spot so that we can like feel, you know, connected, not only to the place in which that is set up, but where people know that they can come to find us. And as that permanence begins to develop, it's like, that's like a hub, it's a HQ, you know what I mean? And that's something in a city of arts and innovation, having those points of, you know, it's basically the same thing you're saying, but having those points of HQ, you know, where you can actually be at, where you can actually set up, you know, you have Mixer for a few, you know, different things. You've got the 9th floor of the Liberty Plaza building for a few different things. You've got, you know, some of the stuff that we're doing at the, you know, like at the Arts Council buildings, you know what I'm saying, at Ronaldo, and Authoring Actions building, you know what I mean? Like those are some places where stuff is happening, but I think it's like, we not to just say we need more, but it's like, we actively need more, and like a depth of the things that are going on already. And to connect those, because you don't go to the grocery store for everything. You're not necessarily, well, I mean, if you go to Costco, maybe like you could get your tires done and some other stuff happening, but there are specific things that are specialty things that have different needs, and being able to identify that as, you know, maybe we need to set up some more specialty and specialized things for the different aspects of art in this city, because there's a lot of specialized things for innovation in this city. I mean, you go to, you know, you go to Bailey Park and there's a whole lot going on there, but each of those different buildings has a different, you know, focus, you know, a different thing that they're kind of helping to progress and move toward. So maybe similarly with the arts, and it's like having those spaces set up in ways, one, to India's point of being able to have space to just hang out and kick it, but also, you know, having space to say like, hey, we're going here, and this is like, there's a ton of stuff dedicated to photographers. This is going to be helpful for them. You know what I'm saying? They're very, very, you know, important in that aspect. So yeah, I think that would be characteristic to me of a city of arts and innovation, of understanding that the specialization that's happening, as well as the communication in order to bring community together, is happening on both fronts of both arts and innovation, to be able to propel forward both of those, you know, ideas. So
yeah, I think that I just wrote down permanence in place. I really like that statement. And I think it is very much needed, because otherwise it could feel like they're all one-offs, which isn't sustainable. And so having that sort of goal of permanence in place, to me, is the epitome of what this community was sort of founded on. I mean, it's been first in a lot of things, and I mean, first arts council in the country. So setting the standards for others. We've had a lot of arts and cultural offerings here that now are in other communities. And so they were sort of snatched up from us. And so I think that we need to sort of build that back up and continue to set the standards. And we can do that. And that is the missing piece from our perspective, from an arts and cultural perspective, but just as a general community perspective. So I think that sort of led to my next question, which you answered through some of your comments, both of your comments, quite frankly. And, my question was, what are we doing to keep artists here, to attract artists and keep them here? And I think if we have that sense of permanence and place and different options for artists, that's what's going to keep them here, knowing that they can also make a living as an artist and have a variety of different outlets. They can make this a home base. It doesn't have to just be here, but they can make this their home base as well. And I think that's the goal, to really support that City of Arts and Innovation piece.
Yeah.
How do you see, from your perspective, how are individuals and businesses supporting the arts in our community?
So I would say for me, as an artist, I became creative in the way in which I thought about my practice, right? And so I had to figure out not only how to use my art outside of the museum, because if you don't go into the gallery, you won't see it, right? But how do I create opportunities where my work can be a teaching tool? Now, I'm not saying that all artists are creating work that is used for educational purposes, but because I was an educator originally, I wanted to create opportunities where I could actually use the tools that I made to create opportunities for growth in other places. And so because of that, I've been allowed to, or had the opportunity, I should say, to collaborate with a number of organizations in Winston-Salem and being supported in that way. And I think sometimes as a maker, you don't feel like you're supported at home. I feel supported at home, right? And so being able to collaborate with different organizations, I do a lot around the DE&I space, using art as a teaching tool for social justice and change, thinking about how we can be more inclusive, using the testimonies from the women I photographed to create stories. And so I think those opportunities have allowed me to go into spaces that maybe I normally wouldn't be in, to educate in a way that people may not necessarily be used to experiencing art in that way. And so I think I had to rethink the way I was going to approach my own practice. And I think as artists, we have to be aware of what we're bringing to a different organization, but organizations in that same breath have to be open to new experiences. Before I collaborated here in Winston-Salem with some of the most amazing organizations, like the Arts Council, I was collaborating with organizations in New York, and they allowed me to do my case studies. They allowed me to do all these different programs with them, and I was able to build a kind of foundation there. And so sometimes people may not be ready for exactly what you're doing quite yet. And that's why I said it's important for artists to think about their practice in a kind of global way, because you may find that your audience isn't home right now, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to kind of build those relationships and bring stuff back home. And I think that was important for me to think about what I can bring back home since I was going to be here. And also, how can I also collaborate with my community? So yeah, I hope I answered the question. I think I did.
Yeah, and it touches a little bit. We had a question actually in the chat come in a few moments ago, so I'm sorry that we've been delayed on answering it, but has the City of Arts and Innovation been supportive of your artistic talents? Yeah. And I would love to have that answer from both of you. And I think you started to go down that path from how have individuals and businesses been supportive. Yeah. So if you want to expound on that further, that would be great. And then of course, Spencer, I'd love for you to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have. Like I talk about my first exhibits, my first grants, being able to collaborate with different organizations across the city have been really meaningful. And I think that they have definitely added so much to my practice as a maker and supported me. I think that as an artist, I realized that's not going to sustain me, right? So it's a difference between support and sustainability, right? And I think being able to be sustained, I have to work all over the world, right? So I work in different cities, I work in different places, I'll be in New Jersey. So I find myself all over the world in order to create sustainability. And so I think as a city of arts and innovation, I think what Spencer was saying, thinking about like land equity, right? Where do we spend a lot of our monies towards certain things? What do we support in terms of certain things? And I think that would create a different level of sustainability in terms of my long-term vision of being in Winston-Salem. Because people are pulling you. They're like, listen, we want you in New York. We want you in LA. Come on, are you coming out to Paris this weekend? You know, that kind of thing, right? So I think it's easy as artists to say, oh, wow, you know, I can sustain myself here more because I can build something there. I can create a foundation there, right? And I think we want to think about foundationally. I'm here for my family. My mama's here, my daddy's here, right? And so that keeps me here. But I'm not sure in terms of sustainability, if I could be here without thinking about what my foundation thinks. Like what you said, Chase, people are trying to expand, we're trying to grow, and, you know, and how can we do that in a space if we don't have a foundation in terms of like a real space to be in? Yeah.
That's great. Spencer, any insights from you on that question?
Yeah, I would say to the first question, like, I think you were asking how individuals and businesses are supporting the arts. Practically, they're hiring us and they're purchasing our work, I think, and also creating spaces in different things for us to be present. I mean, this is an example, and so knowing that there are different entities that want to have aspects of, you know, an event or something very, you know, liven up in some ways, or just have a different cultural dynamic or presence, having the intentional thought of saying, well, I really want to have music from a musician in this portion. I really want to showcase these prints from this local artist in this portion. I really want to tie in the arts and not have it be an ancillary thing in an event or in something else, but actually have it be a part of something that is joined kind of together. Those are maybe ways that I've seen more recently that are kind of inspiring me to be like, oh, how are people thinking through their events? How are people thinking through their day-to-day life? If you have an office building, are you thinking about putting local art on the walls? Are you looking about, you know, thinking about having somebody put a mural on the side of your building? You know, those are like, you know, with the Arts Council, what we're doing, like with the Amplify stuff, it's like, are you creating space for local artists to play, for musicians to play, for poets to speak? You know, are you giving space? You know, your business is open from 5 a.m. until 3 p.m. in the afternoon. What is happening from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m.? Are you opening that up for, you know, different expressions of art and, you know, artistic things to happen? Those are ways that I'm seeing like support actually being something that's, you know, not just fiscally impactful to an artist, but like creating a communal aspect of that, what we were kind of talking about earlier. And so there are some of those things happening in the community. And I think more of those things to that point are really helpful. And then to the question of, are we, you know, how has the City of Arts and Innovation, you know, supported me? I mean, Winston, I've only been in Winston, I'm almost 4 years. So I'm fairly new to the city. I'm fairly new to North Carolina. And so a lot of what my context was before this, I lived in Arizona. So I'm from Arizona, born and raised. Hey, now that's what it is. But it's but I love Winston because Winston gave me space to, I don't know, to work things out. You know, I mean, I was interested in DJing at a bar when I first got here. I went to the owner of that bar and I said, hey, I really like the vibe here. I would love to spin here. Is there any possible way that I could, you know, do like a stage essentially and, you know, go from there? He's like, yeah. He's like, you're going to DJ on Saturday. If we like you, we're going to keep you. I was like, cool. And really, you know, had that go on. And it was just like, wow. Or just, you know, different conversations around the city and being able to start different, you know, artistic and community driven things. You know, this is such a fertile landscape for that. I think it has that in it. It doesn't necessarily always come through, you know, in terms of like showing, you know, beyond maybe the beginning parts of it, but it has the framework for that. There's so much here. It's like it's been built into the name. So it has to in some way, you know, bring that to bear. And so for me, it has in a lot of ways, it's taken some time, over the course of time. Obviously, COVID was that was crazy. But at the end of the day, through that, there's been a lot that has, a lot of opportunity afforded to move toward those things. And even in the pivots that I've had to make, being able to have enough lane space, like those lane lines on the, creative lane lines, to be able to support any of those pivots that I'm doing. And that's something that's very rare that I haven't really seen. I've been to a lot of different cities in the US, I was just recently in New York, and I'm like, New York you're just grinding, like you're just going.
Always.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
to have that be in the midst of like a up and growing, like a city that is continuing to grow, but has that really set up in the way in which its kind of context is supposed to kind of move forward, is really neat. And so I would say yes, it is happening. I think it ought to happen more.
Yeah.
But some of those ways of thinking, by being inclusive to the arts, not just to say that we did something that included arts, but to have that be a part of the mission of what you're doing and how that speaks to the mission of what you're doing, whether it be music or like visual or, anything else, is something that I think can really help and grow that support.
Yeah.
That's great. We have about 9 minutes left, and we have several questions that have popped up in the chat. So I want to get to those as well. Some really awesome questions. I'm going to skip around a little bit because there was one that just came in as a follow-up to what you both were just discussing. So pertaining to the question that you both just answered, is it actually supporting sustainable income and properly paid creative opportunities?
I would say yes and no, right? Yes and no. So I would say yes, there are opportunities to, for lack of a better word, make money doing the thing that you do, right? So whether it's photography, whether it's educational opportunities, I would say yes, there are opportunities to do that. In that same breath, though, I think that there are also people who contact you and expect you to do things for free, right? Or they expect you to do something for like 50% off or 75% off. Or, like it's basically air, like they're offering you some air and they're like, you want to breathe that, because that's, so I think that generally speaking, I think there's not enough there are not enough people in Winston who are valuing artists in a way and paying them their worth. So there are people, there are organizations, but these are the people whose mission and vision, similar to what Spencer was saying, it's their mission and vision to do that, right? And those are the people who are continuously supporting artists, the Arts Council, Renota House, SICA, but this is what they do. What we need are more people outside of the normal art sector to say, oh, wait, look at our walls. Maybe we should do something in here. Oh, wait. We need to do some programming around the community. Maybe we should reach out to artists and pay them their worth. If you don't have the money, partner with somebody else. If you can't partner, write a grant, right? I think that what happens is we ask artists to do things for free often without understanding what the time and the talent and all the things that went into the thing they're delivering to you, right? And so I think that at the end of the day, it's not about these same organizations supporting artists. It's about new leaders in the community being innovators, being risk takers, and understanding the value of what is going to be brought to you and saying, I'm going to do what I can to make sure this person gets paid their worth. Yes. I'm not going to ask them to discount anything. If it's $10,000, we're going to pay you $10,000.
Yes.
That's what we need, right? And so I think that would help Chase. That would help a lot of people, if we did that. Winston-Salem, I'm from here. When the Haynes family decided to give work to Winston-Salem State University, they gave their entire collection, most of their work, but they went beyond that. They said, what else we're going to do? We're going to actually give money to create an endowment. What else we're going to do? We're going to create a whole sculpture garden so the students can actually walk around campus and see all of this amazing artwork. Winston-Salem State has the most public art in any campus in North Carolina. right? Why? Because they were innovators, they were risk takers, and they invested in community. And I think that that's what we're asking for. We're asking for these leaders of these communities to say, you know what, we're going to be risk takers, we're going to be innovators, and we're going to collaborate and push the envelope to our city so that it can actually stand for what it believes in. And that's art and innovation. So to that question, I hope I answered it.
That's great.
Yeah, yes.
We do have a lot of questions in the chat, and if for some reason we do not get to all of them, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. I'm happy to answer any of these questions as well, sort of as we're driving things forward. I will, and again, just sort of jumping around, someone did have a question for me that or will the Arts Council provide arts-based programming to further out in the community? It's traditionally been not made available or accessible to others in our community. And I'm sure they're feeling left out of the innovation and art that they see happening in adjacent neighborhoods. I will tell you that we have just completed, and I'm not using the strategic plan words, it's a visioning roadmap to create significant change in this community using arts, culture, and creativity as a tool and a catalyst for that. Community expansion is a priority for us, and using the work of our area artists and arts organizations, but community really being at the sort of head of the table, because what we don't want to do is continue to perpetuate any long-term issues that have happened and divides that have been part of this community. We are committed to having communities' voice being heard at the proverbial table. With that, we will be able to create some serious, long-lasting change and some great art that goes along with it. So I hope that answered your question. Great. So let me go to another question that was asked. So someone said, super inspiring discussion. The question is, how can we best, A, know about the upcoming arts experiences, particularly focused on justice and DEI, and B, help spread the word and build the audience in our community, because folks just don't know about what's going on. I think there's a variety of ways that we can do that. We, from an Arts Council perspective, we have cityofthearts.com that just provides regular opportunities throughout our community, but it's also boots on the ground. I have a new role here that is focused on community impact and programs. And so we are out and about. It's not about if you build it, they will come. We have to be actively participating in all aspects of our community to create that awareness. And that's going to help build audiences. That's going to help build participation. And it's going to respond to needs in our community. So do you guys want to jump in on that?
Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. Wow.
It's a heavy question, and we're happy to chat even further after this about that.
Yeah. Can you read the question one more time?
Yes, let me go back to it. It's upcoming arts experiences, but especially those focused on justice and DEI, and then spreading the word about those programs and building audiences.
Yeah, I mean, so I just went to the talk, actually was, I believe it was through Leadership Winston-Salem. There was a gentleman who wrote a book doing a lot of work in DEI. And it was over at the, where was this at? It was over at the 500 West 5th building, and the gentleman's name was William. And he basically, I would say the main part of this is like, we talk a lot about wanting to support like DEI and like other community driven things, but it's like actually going to the events, actually following the people, doing the research may be necessary to kind of step into those spaces more so, even in the uncomfortability of it, is something that I would very much recommend as a starting point. It's like there's a few like people who are, setting up events for diversity, and inclusion, and looking at the different folks who are in Winston, who are writing about that, different folks at the university level who are involved in some of those, programs at the different universities, contacting them, seeing the different events that are happening. Like we just had a gentleman who did Just Mercy come into town, through Wake Forest, and his speech and his and that talk, and some of those things that have really affected not only the local community, but the community at large in the US. And there are those events, but it's like sometimes you have to just go look for them. If you want to find something, you're gonna look for it. If you lose your keys, you want to go find your keys so you can start your car and get to where you need to go. And having that as like a starting place, I think for me is like that's very important to the beginning of the conversation. It's like that information can be provided, but it has to be of interest, and something that you want to pursue and move toward. And actively doing that is going to be a much more enriching, I think, experience than if somebody just gave you the answer all the time. And so that would be maybe the place I would start.
That's great. It is 1 o'clock, and so I've been given the flag to wrap it up. But any parting comments? I think we didn't get to all the questions, but any social platforms you want to share, or how they can find out more about your art, and then we can turn it over to Catherine.
No, sure. So I saw a statement in one of the questions where someone said, it was sad that I didn't experience art growing up here in Winston-Salem. And I think that so much of opportunities to collaborate with organizations and for schools to collaborate is definitely happening, but it can happen even more, right? And so I think joining boards, being a part of leadership, thinking about how you can create opportunities so students who live on the South Side where I grew up, or live on the East Side of Winston-Salem, can have opportunities to go across and look at all the wonderful things that are happening in other parts of the town. So I would say that joining boards, joining leadership to create those opportunities would be very important if you're thinking about how you yourself can create opportunities for students to be exposed to art and to be exposed to some of the great things that are happening in the city. For me, myself, you all can check out my work at endiabeal.com. I do D&I training with organizations that uses art as a foundation and teaching tool, and that is also available on my website if you're interested in learning more about that. I have a current show up at the Weatherspoon, which is in Greensboro at UNCG. So if you're interested in even just seeing some of my work on view, there's an exhibition called Corporate Disclosure, again around D&I, that is available on view at the Weatherspoon until May. And that's on the campus of UNCG. And that's the only local show I have up right now. So yeah.
Sweet. As far as me, you can go to the Arts Council website and look at the Amplify event. So that would be one thing that I have up at the moment that is local. I will also, I'd be happy to provide my phone number. Any conversations that anybody would like to have. I don't have social media, so I'm not on Instagram. I'm also not on Facebook, but I do have a phone number and I do have time to meet. So that is one thing I can type it in the chat. I don't exactly know how to do this, but but I'd be more than willing to have those conversations. There are a lot of different events and things that I go to within the city. I'm curating for the Amplify event. I'm also curating at a couple other spaces in town, and I'm at a lot of the local functions that are occurring. And so I'd be more than happy to point people in different directions of, with some of the things that I've, been exposed to, as well as have conversations around maybe some of the things that we were talking about today and how to move the ball forward. So how do I put this in the chat?
Spencer, actually, we're going to send something out to everybody that's registered for this particular webinar that includes your contact information as well as Endia and Chase's.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kat.
So I'd like to thank our moderator, Chase Law, Endia Beal, and Spencer Aubrey for the richness that they add to our community through their talents and their passions. Endia said something about joining leadership, and while I know she meant broad-term leadership, it is recruitment season for Leadership Winston-Salem. And Chase is an Insight Leadership Winston-Salem alum. We will be reaching out to Spencer and Endia offline to talk to them about their potential for the next class. If this webinar struck a chord with you and you'd like to know more about what we do or what the buzz is about, please register for an information session on our website at leadershipwinstonsalem.org. Jared is also going to add a link to the chat in the next couple of seconds. If you're already an alum and you know someone who would love to experience Leadership Winston-Salem, please go to our website and click on the Nominate a Candidate button, which Jared will be entering into the chat immediately after that one. Just a reminder that Leadership Winston-Salem is a nonprofit organization that relies heavily on the support of individual donors and corporate sponsors to provide the array of programming that we do. If you enjoyed what we offer today, you're invited to make a contribution to the organization on our website by clicking the Donate Now button found on our homepage. My thanks to each of you for joining us today, and keep your eyes peeled for webinars in the future. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks.